Welcome back to the Changemaker Podcast. I'm your host, Deke, Copenhaver, and my guest today is E. Matthew Whiz. That's his call sign, Buckley. He's a decorated retired Navy fighter pilot turned CEO, published author, and renowned speaker for Fortune 500 companies, including AT&T, GE, and Cisco. Whiz is also the founder of the TOPGUN Fighter Foundation, whose mission is to support veterans. He applied his combat knowledge into his business, TOPGUN Options, and was able to grow it to a multi-million-dollar options trading school. Prior to TGO, he was an F-18 Hornet instructor and flew 44 combat missions over Iraq, being awarded 2 Strike Flight Air Medals by the President of the United States. He combined his unprecedented experiences in the military and corporate America in the writing of From Sea Level to Sea Level, a fighter pilot's journey from the front lines to the front office. Man, that's awesome.
Welcome to the Changemaker Podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today, and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Welcome, Whiz.
Thanks for having me, Deke. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's inspiring to me. But just for a little history for our listeners, how did you initially get interested in becoming a fighter pilot?
Well, I grew up, my family's originally from South Philadelphia, South Jersey, South Philadelphia region, big Irish Catholic family, total six brothers and sisters. And my parents always raised me, service above self. I was born on the Jersey Shore, and I love the ocean. And then my neighbor across the street, I was best friends with the son, but the dad was a pilot for the Air National Guard. He flew fighter jets out of Atlantic City International, and this was I'm going to date myself. This was the 80s, right? Early 80s, where we were in and we are again. We're in a hot war actually right now, but we were in a Cold War with the Soviet Union, and Russian bombers used to fly up and down the coast in and out of Cuba into our ADIZ, our Air Defense Identification Zone, to try and test our response time. So this guy would scramble, and intercept Soviet aircraft. And I thought that guy was just the coolest guy in the world. So knew at a young age I wanted to be a fighter pilot. Knew at a young age I loved the ocean. So kind of like a Reese's peanut butter cup, you put those two together. And since my earliest memories, I always knew I wanted to fly fighter aircraft off of aircraft carriers and defend our country in the United States Navy.
Well, thank you for your service. And Wiz, you and I have had discussions. My dad flew B-17 bombers in World War II. And was really that service above self was something that he really instilled in me. So I've always been a huge fan of pilots. But I'll tell you, it's interesting because we talk about we're in a hot war right now, and I said we might not go there, but we will because it's an important topic. But I was talking to a minister on Tuesday, and he said, we in the United States, just looking at what's going on in Ukraine, we don't know we haven't had a war on our soil since the Civil War. And we don't know what it's like to fight a battle on our soil or to be occupied. And so your thoughts on that, it's almost like Americans have become anesthetized to war, it seems like.
Yeah, and it's usually the people banging the drums to go war the most who have never seen war. I posted a General MacArthur quote today who essentially said, soldiers are the last people who want war because they're the ones that actually see the horror. So it's really easy to think about over there with no skin in the game. So this is it's absolutely devastating. I never thought I'd wake up to seeing war in Europe, to seeing the rise of the Soviet Union again. But weakness invites aggression, and it's pretty sad. You said we haven't seen war in our soil in a long time. We're going to, and it's going to be a different type of warfare. If the president today has any backbone, he's going to kick Russia out of the SWIFT, out of the international banking system. And if he does that, Putin has already said he's going to retaliate in a bad way. And it'll be cyber warfare. So if you remember, maybe even this time last year. I forget when it was last year, but the Colonial Pipeline was shut down by Russian hackers. And if you remember, our response, or not our response, the government's response was, well, Colonial's a private company, so they got to kind of figure this out on their own. What? So we pay taxes, but we're up to ourselves to fend off a cyber attack from the enemy? So I have no idea what that meant last year. And then the last time President Biden met with Putin, he gave him a list. He gave him a list of 16 things that you shouldn't cyber attack. I mean, Vladimir Putin's just got to be like, you just gave me a list of 16 things I am going to cyber attack. So you're right. We haven't had a shooting war on our soil in a long time, but that's mainly because of 300 million guns in this country. You've seen the movie Red Dawn, right? The good one with Patrick Swayze. Well, actually, Red Dawn's going on in Ukraine today. I think I saw the president or the farm, whatever his name is, of Ukraine giving out guns to like every homeowner. I mean, this is just absolutely insane. As you and I are on this podcast, innocent civilians are being turned into hair, teeth, and eyeballs. War is just an absolute horror, and we've had just a serious miscalculation on all fronts with this. For people who don't know their history, we're failing right now as America. Trust me, I don't want boots on. I don't want. Yeah, my oldest son, he's a senior at Norwich University in Vermont. He's in the Corps of Cadets, and I guess I dropped him on his head when he was a kid because he wants to fly for the Marine Corps. And then my middle son, Jack, wants to fly for the Navy, wants to be a Navy fighter pilot. And I don't want my sons dying in Eastern Europe. But there were things we could have done. A couple things. If you're not a student of history, which I am, I was on active duty. I was flying F-18s when this happened in 1990. Because remember, when the Soviet Union fell, Ukraine became its own country. Yeah. Ukraine had a ton of nukes, had a ton of bases, military. They became a nuclear power. Well, in 1994, Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and Bill Clinton went to Ukraine and said, "Hey, why don't you give all that stuff up? And we're going to sign this piece of paper." It sounds like Neville Chamberlain. I have a signed document from Adolf Hitler. Why don't you guys sign this piece of paper that says, I'm going to give up all these nukes, but we promise, the U.S. and Great Britain, we promise if Russia, not going to happen, trust us, but if Russia ever did move against you guys, we're going to defend you. We didn't.
Yeah.
So here we are. And then in 2014, when they invaded Crimea. They invaded Ukraine in 2014. Putin, Barack Hussein Obama, sent blankets and MREs, meals ready to eat. And he didn't even send them on military aircraft. He sent them on civilian contract planes because he didn't want to inflame Putin.
Yeah.
At the time, I said, it doesn't matter inflaming Putin or not. He's going to move and take the rest of Ukraine. So, and not a big fan of John McCain, but John McCain was right at the time. He said us not providing lethal arms to Ukraine is a national failure. So at the time, we could have armed Ukraine with enough lethal machinery to not let this happen. So, I'm a 50 Delta on this. We could, and I'm watching because I'm trading, right? I'm trading all this stuff. I have a soul, right? As an American, I'm telling you how I feel, but I'm Gordon Gekko. I teach people how to trade options, and I'm printing money today. So I hate talking about printing money as people are dying, but hey, man, at the end of the day, that's my job, is to teach people how to make money in these type of market conditions. But, as I'm hearing right now, we're getting ready for the president to come on to talk about what sanctions he's going to do. They're like, well, we're going to rush through an agreement to try and get them military aid. It's too late, man. All over my social media, I'm seeing, Su-25 aircraft doing missile attacks. I'm seeing helicopters getting shot down. The country's already been invaded, and here comes the United States maybe we'll send them some military aid now. It's too late, man. Yeah. So we're in a lot of trouble. And if you're Xi Jinping sitting there right now, drinking your coffee in your bunny slippers, you're going, all right, well, clearly we can move on Taiwan now. So we're in a lot of trouble. This world's in a lot of trouble right now.
Well, I appreciate your perspective on that. But before we came on, I was telling you I was talking to a marketing firm out of New York City this week. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, man, I like what you do with trying to bring people together on common ground, but you got to have an enemy. And I'm like, dude, I do have an enemy. I grew up a huge punk rock fan, and my enemy is everybody that tries to divide this country and the
Correct.
extremes on either end.
Yeah.
Because I think we have a crisis of leadership. When
Yeah.
basically the extremes in politics are just, they're trying to get elected. But my wife was asking me, what's going on in the Ukraine? I said, it's about money, power, and control. At the end of the day, that's what politics can be here in the U.S., but it just governments, that becomes what
Correct.
it's about. And I've shared I had a very strong relationship, still do, with the military while I was in office. And it dawned on me, I was with some soldiers one day, I'm like, it's not generals that send people to war, it's politicians that do or don't,
Correct.
unfortunately.
Until we're not some banana dictatorship, right?
Yeah.
We're not like Argentina or Brazil where the military is in charge of stuff. We salute, right? We salute our duly elected commander in chief, and we follow those orders. And sometimes it doesn't work out too well for us. I mean, Vladimir Putin telegraphed his intentions. I think that, what was it, a July speech? He more or less said he was going to do this. And then earlier this week, that speech he gave earlier this week, if you listen to what the man said, the Soviet Union's back.
Yeah.
His exact words, I'm paraphrasing, not exact words, were, the collapse of the Soviet Union was the worst thing that happened in the 20th century, and he's going to bring it back.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because we don't listen to our enemies, right? Putin said all this stuff, and we're like, oh, he's not going to do that. Same thing with Iran. Iran's like, oh yeah, when we get a nuke, not if, when we get a nuke, we're going to wipe Israel off the map. Oh, and as many Americans as we can too. Our administration, oh, come on, that's not true. Why don't we start believing what our enemies tell us they're going to do, right? So, this is not in a good way. It really does. You're right. Whoever told you, you need to have an enemy, they're part of the problem, right? Because we don't need to have an enemy. If you, it's this ego, it's this separation that I believe that we have, from God, from source, from truth, from divine, whatever you want to label that you can't label. As humans, we got to label stuff. That's my coffee cup. This is my computer. That's my pen. Man, we are all together. We are all one soul. The poor guy on the street corner, the billionaire over there, you, me, we are all the same soul. We all come from the same source, man. And this war, this poverty, all this type of stuff is just because of that ego and that separation that we've gotten from, I'll say it, God.
Yeah.
And 5 years ago, me probably wouldn't talk like that, but I'm a different me today because of some of the things that I've been doing with my charity and stuff like that. But so I have a completely different take on everything right now. Old me would be suiting up my boots and flying to Ukraine right now, but we really do need to heal the divisions. And you're right, man. It's the outside the bell curve people that get the airtime, right? The left and the right.
Yep.
The news runs on bleed, right? If it bleeds, it leads. So those are the people that get the airtime, unfortunately, and those are the ones that are pulling this country apart.
But I'll tell you, Wiz, it's funny. So when I ran for office, I never went negative. I focused on bringing people together and not dividing them, and won 3 elections with 64% of the vote, doing it differently.
Wow.
Not doing politics as usual. So
The
I
old way.
I had a radio call-in show for about a year on conservative talk radio here. Well, they had canceled Glenn Beck and replaced him with me. I'd never done radio.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't even know where to plug the headphones in when I did it. But it was the furthest thing from conservative talk radio. We had local live music every Wednesday. I mean, we covered, mental illness, which we're going to talk about, suicide prevention, all this stuff. But basically, it was the antithesis of conservative talk radio. So the sales manager at the station, told my then assistant that my show made more money for them than Glenn Beck ever did, but then they canceled me and replaced me with Glenn Beck. So I'm like, if people are provided with an alternative, they'll go to it. But I think alternatives are threats to the extremes. But this is, this podcast seems to be doing pretty well. I just produced another one called "Leadership is a Team Sport," because you and I know it is. And it's I was talking to my producer out of Florida today, and she's like, "You've struck a chord," and I'm like, "But that's people want alternatives, and people want to come together and feel like they're a bigger part of something bigger than themselves. But
Correct.
I also understand, and you're so on the money. We are all connected, but there are people and entities and organizations that profit big off of keeping us divided.
Oh yeah.
And keeping us afraid.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, they do, and I hate using this term, but I'm going to use it. Right, the elites. There really is kind of an us versus them. The inside the beltway, man. You've been in politics. It really is a different world. It's they call it Planet Hollywood for a reason, and then inside the beltway for a reason. It really seems like the more isolated people are in these elites, they're just so disconnected from reality and from people, and it's for their own interests and their own. There's generations of people that live in D.C. that work in the bureaucracy, and it's a system. Love or hate Donald Trump, and we don't even have to get into that. The dude walked into the kitchen, turned the lights on, and showed us where all the roaches were, and showed us he just turned the lights on, man, and showed us everything. And if you believe what happened, we as a country just kind of walked over and turned the lights off and said, no, everything's fine underneath there. I don't think that's the case, man. I think that this country has a lot of cleaning up to do, and it really is time to heal and get back to what used to be the center of this country, right? Where we actually did respect discourse, right?
Yeah.
Patrick Henry or whoever it was, I don't agree with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it.
Yeah.
Man, we've lost that. I don't agree with what you say, and I'm going to get you canceled for saying it, and I hate you for saying it. I mean, where did this vitriol come from? It's insane.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, once again, I mean, I know just in my political life, in my time in the media and everything, if you provide people with an alternative, they'll go to it because they're sick of the extremes. I mean, I don't watch the mainstream media anymore, and I'm like, it's basically there is nothing mainstream about the mainstream media because it's skewed to the far left and the far right. But I'm like,
correct.
I want to bring on people like you that can have conversations like these because you're right. Our nation needs healing, and it's not going to come through the mainstream media or through politicians.
Oh God, no. No, that'll be the end of them, right?
Yeah.
If we can all get along and get together, news at 11 leading with everything that's bad goes away.
Yeah.
So it is not in their best interest for us to heal. It is in their best interest for us to keep fighting, hating each other, and all this division. Having these platforms like a Twitter where people just yelling at each other at the top of their lungs back and forth behind the safety of a keyboard. It's weird, man. We are in a weird place right now.
Yeah, it's funny. So for 9 years in office, I had an open door policy, and I was out there in all parts of the community regularly. I went to the Y every morning. I'm like, if you wanted to give me a piece of your mind, you could find me any place. And I would have that loud vocal minority saying crap about me on on the internet and everything. But I'm like, they would never. I'm like, if you want to come say something to me, I'm in my office with the door open. But,
right here.
But we think that the vocal minority are prevailing public opinion, and it's just not. But I want to get into something that you're working on that you and Lee Simons are producing a documentary called Fallen Heroes, which I am fascinated by this and have just learned so much from you guys. But talk about healing. So share with our viewers, our listeners, everybody, what you're working on with that project and how important it is and you're about the most credible advocate for using psychedelics to treat anything I've ever met.
Well, it's interesting because when you use the term psychedelic and fighter pilot in the same sentence, they just don't go together, right? I'm the last. Yeah, no, it does. I'm the last person on the face of the planet. I tell people that 5 years ago me would look at today me and kick my own ass. There's no way in hell that there's no way in hell that I'd be sitting here right now, but I absolutely am. So back in May. So I started a foundation called TOPGUN Fighter Foundation to try and reduce veteran suicide. In the time that you and I are going to talk today, a veteran is going to kill himself or herself on average 1 per hour. One of my best friends, man, Eric Swede Swenson, Marine fighter pilot. He was a groomsman in my wedding, my best friend, man. Beautiful wife, 4 daughters. He put a bullet in his head. It's absolutely horrific. We send these young men and women over to protect us. And when we come home, we lose more at home than we ever do in combat at their own hands. And it's heartbreaking. It's devastating. So I was supporting a couple foundations that are using psychedelic-assisted therapy to reduce veteran suicide. And I was stunned that these type of organizations existed. So I did a little reading, and I got in touch with a Navy SEAL who had done the medicine, right? We don't call it drugs. It's not drugs, right? These plants have been around before us. Leave it to us. So before doctors, real doctors, and over the past 200 years and advances in medicine, we healed from what? The earth, man. Everything to heal a human being, God provided on this planet. It already exists. So these plants have been around for thousands of years, and it is medicine. Right? There's a meme I see often on the internet. It's got a picture of Jesus shrugging his shoulders like this because it says, God makes, plant medicine to heal. Man makes medicine, said plants illegal. And God's like, really? So, in May of last year, his name's Marcus Capone. He was a Navy SEAL who came back. After countless deployments. He was a breacher, right? He was the first SEAL in, puts the explosives on the door, boom, just concussive blast to the head. He suffered from horrific PTSD and TBI, traumatic brain injury. And, man, he told me, Whiz, at one point, I was on 10 different medications from the VA. And he had shown me his brain scans. I mean, this thing was, dark, gray, black, his brain just done. And one of his best friends had committed suicide, another Navy SEAL gone. And his wife they were at the memorial service, and Amber, his wife, looked at him like, you're next. You will be next. And she had done some research into this psychedelic assisted therapy as a last ditch effort. And she put him on an airplane to Mexico and prayed for the best. And he came back. As soon as he got off the jet bridge, he's like, I had my husband back. I had Marcus back. So I thought that was pretty compelling. And I had done my research and stuff like that. And Amber and Marcus had come to Boca Raton because his mom had moved here. And I went out to dinner, and I was giving them a big check. And they're like, hey, man, what are you doing in 2 weeks? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. They're like, do you want to go to Mexico and do the medicine? And we have a pretty eclectic group going. I'm like, going to Mexico with a bunch of SEALs to do drugs? Sign me up. Man, I had no idea what I was in for, right? That was old me. Well, the group that I went with, one of the Navy SEALs was, Marcus Luttrell. And Marcus Luttrell is the lone survivor. He was awarded the Navy Cross, obviously the movie Lone Survivor, the book Lone Survivor. So I went down with Marcus. I went down with Jared Taylor, who's one of the founders of Black Rifle Coffee. He was a combat air controller, another Navy SEAL, JJ, and then the first NFL player. His name is Robert Gallery. Just horrific CTE, right? Yeah. TBI in the NFL is CTE. Horrible. So me and those 4 other guys that went down to Mexico. Why'd you go to Mexico, Whiz? It's a Schedule I drug in the United States. Whoever wrote that law has no idea what they're talking about, right? Because a Schedule I drug says what? No therapeutic use. I'm sitting here today to tell you it saved my life. So who are we going to listen to? A bunch of Navy SEALs and veterans who come back completely healed? I had 20 years of therapy in a weekend, which we'll get to. Or do you listen to a dude who's never done it, who just kind of wrote this in 1980, or Richard Nixon or whoever, the war on drugs? It's an absolute disgrace. Thankfully, the VA, the state of Maryland, I saw the other day that they're passing a law that they're going to give funding for veterans to do psychedelic assisted therapy. Ketamine is now legal. So we're changing the narrative, right? And our No Fallen Heroes project is going to be the supersonic solution to changing this narrative on psychedelics. Why? Because the biggest franchise in movie history, Top Gun, is releasing Maverick, right? It's been 30, 35 years since that blockbuster movie, and we're going to release this right after Maverick comes out. Because Pete Mitchell, Tom Cruise in the movie, is a perfect candidate for this healing. His dad got shot down in Vietnam in an F-4. He thought it was his mistake. His dad died, in a bad way. His mom died at a young age, didn't get into the Naval Academy. His best friend, Goose, died in a mishap that he thinks he was responsible for. He's killed 3 guys in combat. I could go on. And his call sign's Maverick. He'd be the type of guy who'd jump on his motorcycle and fly down to Mexico to get this healing. So me and my 4 brothers went down there, and we did Friday night. We did a fire ceremony. It's very clinical. It's half clinical, half spiritual, meaning you do a drug intake, you do a drug test there. There's a cardiologist on site. You do an EKG. You're hooked up to an EKG. There's an advanced life support unit in the driveway, and there's 2 nurses on site. But it's very soulful as well. The setting, it overlooks the Pacific. It's beautiful. The house, everything. It's incredible. So we did what's called ibogaine. And ibogaine is a derivative of a root called iboga from Gabon, from Central Africa. And this, many people believe, it's actually in the Bible. They believe this is the tree of life, that you're able to speak with God on this music. And again, 5 years ago, me sitting here watching me talk right now would be like, are you insane? But it's the truth. So we did the ibogaine. So iboga is the root, and it's pretty bitter for Westerners to eat, and it's a longer journey. It's like a 3 or 4 day journey. So, and it's got 15 alkaloids in it. Ibogaine is a derivative of iboga, and it's got one of the alkaloids. Man, for 12 to 14 hours, it was without a doubt one of the most significant experiences in my life, just bar none. Now, I'm married. Don't tell my wife that. I have 3 kids. Don't tell my kids that. Those are the most significant events in my life. And this is as equal, if not a little bit more. And it doesn't diminish those. And here's why. Because this experience provides context and shows me how holy and incredible those other things are. Having my 3 children and having my beautiful bride. For 12 hours, man, I was with God, right? And I lost my faith. When I was 13 years old, my sister Monica was killed by a drunk driver. She was a freshman in college at Villanova University. A guy blew a stop sign, threw my sister, 19-year-old sister, out of the car and broke her neck. We were an Irish Catholic family. I was an altar boy. We all went to church every Sunday, all 6 of us. You could not get more Catholic than that. And as a 13-year-old kid, and it destroyed my family. My parents were done. They were destroyed for the rest of their life. So as a 13-year-old kid, I'm like, what type of God kills my sister and destroys my family? My mom and dad were done. I had to raise my little sister. They just checked out. So I lost my faith. So for most of my life, for half of my life, God was an abstract concept to me. I talked to my sister, and kind of like, if anything does exist, she's my guardian angel. But Deke, I'll tell you what, man, it's hard for me to put words to the experience. In space, big white energy, light, love, I felt it. And I remember asking, I'm like, oh man, are you God? And that I didn't get any words, right? God, this was all through energy and feeling. And I got this energy that said, yeah. And boom, man, I just exploded. And when I composed myself, and it's a waking dream, you're not like passed out. You can lift your eye shade up and you're like, okay, I'm in a room. There's Marcus, Luttrell. Oh my God, there's the nurses. So it's a waking dream. And I'm like, oh my God. And of course I'm doubting Matthew, right? Because I'm like, can you give me a sign? And I'm telling you, Deke, around that big white light, the word sign in cursive writing kind of appeared and went away. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, my God's got a sense of humor. So after that, I went on a tour of my life. It felt like God literally had me under God's arm, and I saw everything in my life, not from my point of view, from another. It was incredible. Things that weren't meant for me, God gently would pull me away from. And I'd look at it again, and God would like, no, I have other things better for you. At one point, my sister appeared. She was beautiful. Like the last time I had seen her, she was absolutely beautiful. And my dad appeared. My dad had died a couple years ago from a heart attack at the age of 65. Broke my heart. I love my father. Both of them appeared to me, and it was incredible. But they started to go away, and I was devastated. And I tried to follow where they went, and it broke my heart. On this medicine, if you don't get something, it'll show you again. So they came back again, and I was like, okay, here you are. And they started to go away again, but this time I followed them, and they went into everything. They went into me. They went into the sun. They went into the tree. It was beautiful. 40 years later, I had healed from my sister's death in that moment. I saw exactly where she went, and she didn't go anywhere. Her and my dad are with me. They're with you. They're with us right now. I healed in that moment. And I feel as though I healed my father too. When I saw him and them together, my dad could not have, I can't remember the last time I had seen my dad truly happy. It was before my sister had died. It was incredible. There were things that happened to me personally in my childhood that just, besides my sister dying, that were pretty bad.
Yeah.
That God healed. There were things where when I was with God, I thought some things would be an issue, and God kind of looked at me like, you thought those are forgiven, my son, or you are healed. It was absolutely the most incredible experience of my life. Everything. I saw answers to my future. It's very hard to describe. For 12 hours, 14 hours, I had that. Marcus Luttrell on the other side. So we were all in a big room together. Marcus Luttrell was on the other side of the room, and JT, Jared Taylor, was next to me. It sounded like they were getting cut in half by a saw. These guys were going through hell. Now, there's a saying that we have, and I believe it. The medicine doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you need. So these guys I was like, oh, and I remember at one point, JT next to me, I'm like, oh my God. And they don't call it getting sick or throwing up. It's called purging, right? Yeah. Because first of all, you fast. So you're not like, it's your body releasing energy, man. It sounded like an exorcism. And I remember at one point wanting to like help JT, or I was trying to send him energy or whatever. I'm an aviator. He was a ground guy. I was trying to send him air support, right? And God was like, Matthew, I have them. They're getting exactly what they need, son. Why don't we worry about you? Let's go. And I'm like, but he's like, I got them. They're getting what they need. So the next day I remember asking those guys, I'm like, oh my God. They're like, it was incredible. It's exactly what I needed to heal. They're like, we went through the hell that they went through. It cleaned that hell.
Yeah.
It was just, I was like, oh my God, these guys are going to be miserable tomorrow. And they could not have been happier. So that was the ibogaine. The ibogaine, and here's what's funny. People are like, oh, psychedelic medicine. I'm like, that wasn't fun. Right? People think psychedelics, oh, I'm taking psychedelics, I'm going to a concert. You're taking ibogaine and you're not going anywhere, man. You are not. You're and the ibogaine goes in and takes an inventory of your body. As it started to hit me, I felt this like buzzing, right? My body was vibrating, but I wasn't moving. I actually had to look at my hand. I'm like, am I shaking? I'm like, I'm not even moving. My body was getting into a frequency, to the right frequency. It was like an old radio, right? You're kind of tuning in the dial to get to the right frequency. And once I had tuned in, That's when I kind of got airborne. So, there was a ton of other stuff that happened on the ibogaine, but I want to talk to you about what we did. So the next day they called a gray day or an integration day because you just, you nap, you talk to each other, you laugh, you cry. It's a very spiritual day. And I got to tell you, man, I've talked to people who've done the medicine, absolute atheists. Ain't no way a God exists. They come out of this. And again, that's the label I felt everything. I felt truth. I felt oneness. I felt source. You can call it whatever it is. But on this medicine, you see that everything is one, that there is interconnected, and there is a uniformity to everything. On Sunday, I went to church, man, and I hadn't been to church in a long time since my sister had died. This was the best church I've ever gone to. On Sunday, you do what's called 5-MeO.
It's actually the venom of the Sonoran desert toad. It's from a toad, right? Go figure. So ibogaine's from a root, and what we do on Sundays from a toad. Man, this was insane. The way they told it to me, 5-MeO, DMT, psilocybin, ayahuasca, peyote, those type of things are mom and dad, right? They love you and want what's best for you. Ibogaine is granddad. Granddad loves you, but he's going to beat the shit out of you So ibogaine, I got granddad. So I was told that 5-MeO DMT, would be like kind of mom. They explain that 5-MeO DMT will destroy your ego and you will be one with source, God, truth, divine. I'm like, okay, right. So beautiful. We pulled all the beds out of the room. They left one bed in the middle of the room with pillows around it, which I should have taken as a warning sign. So Marcus Luttrell goes.
Did you have a pillow fight or something?
Well, I'll let you know what happened, man. Close enough. So Marcus goes up first, and he comes down, and they didn't want you talking. After you did your 5-MeO, they kind of kept us separate because you need to go have some time after that. I didn't know why you'd need time, but I do now. So anyway, I go up there. Beautiful bed. I'm sitting in the bed looking out over the Pacific on this beautiful Mexican coastline. It's Sunday morning. I'm in church, man. And the doctor is sitting next to me on the floor it's in a pipe. My integration coach, my Sherpa, my guide was next to me to the left. And then at the head of the bed was Marcus Capone, not Marcus Luttrell, Marcus Capone. He was the Navy SEAL who kind of started all this stuff, whose wife sent him to get treatment. So, man, I get on the bed and you do what's called a handshake hit first, right? To just acclimate your body to what the toad is. And then then they put eye shades up on your head because after you do it, they're going to put the eye shades down and you kind of lay back, you lay down into the bed. So I do the handshake. And I feel pretty good. It's very calming. And then the second one, I do kind of a bigger draw. And they tell you to inhale and you count for 10 seconds and then you hold it for 10 seconds. And then they do a long count. And as you're getting from 10 to about 5, that's when you just start here. I'll tell you kind of what I remember happening. I'll tell you what happened to them. They kind of slid the eye shades down on my back. And as they helped me kind of lie back down into this bed, there was no bed. I just kept actually going. And I just literally exploded. My body just literally exploded into absolute pure light and energy and love. It's just literally, I can't describe what happened, but I can tell you exactly what it felt like. In the blink of an eye, 52 years of sadness, depression, anger, PTSD, drugs, alcohol, disintegrated in the blink of an eye. And I became one with source, with truth, with divine. All of that ego, this layers, this thing disappeared. It was the most peaceful and amazing experience of my life. I've heard people who have had near-death experience. They talk about the light, or they go, man. And I hesitate to use this type of terminology. My integration coach is like, don't say it like that. You're going to scare people. I'm like, I can't describe it in any other way. I died. I didn't die. My ego died. That's exactly what happened. I didn't die. I was, beautiful house, and my friends are right there, but my ego died. When we are born, when God gives us this gift of life, we're perfect. Our souls are absolutely perfect. And then from your mom to this, to life, to getting your lunch money stolen, all of these layers just get added on top of you. You throw combat experience in, you throw losing your best friends, you throw losing your sister. All of that was destroyed. And I got to be with Source. Yeah. Now, that was awesome. It's a peace I've never known in my life. I got 20 years of therapy over this weekend. Now, I had an Apollo 13 moment, and here's what I mean. I went from being one with God and seeing the beauty and interconnectivity of everything is together. I felt forever, and I know that sounds insane. Let me go back to the ibogaine real quick, because I got caught with God in a loop. And here's what I mean by that. When God answered me, when I said, "Oh, are you God?" and he gave me a sign. I said, "Well, where have you been?" And he said, "I have always been, and I will always be." And I couldn't wrap my head around that. I'm like, "But who made you?" And he was very patient. He said, "I have always been, and I will always be." And I'm like, no, you don't understand me, God. Like me talking to God. You don't understand me. So he lifted me up, and I literally went in. I felt forever. I felt exactly. Now I woke up, and I remember one of the first things I told my coach, I had tears in my eyes. I said, "I can't wait to tell my wife, Susie, I love her forever, because I finally know what that means." I actually got to feel, because you can't fathom the idea of God has always been. It was incredible to feel it. So back to the 5-MeO, I felt that forever again, like I did on the ibogaine. I felt God's love and how it can be forever. But here's what happened. The re-entry, man. Trying to come back from being one with Source into this thing was not smooth. Apparently there was still some depression, sadness, anger, self-loathing was still in this thing, this bag of flesh, and it wouldn't leave. So I kind of remember this part of it. I apparently just started yelling at the top of my lungs. The last time I yelled at the top of my lungs like that was when I was on the phone with my sister, with my dad in the emergency room, and the doctor told my mom and my sister my dad had died. I yelled at the top of my lungs. I did it again on the 5-MeO. And then apparently that wasn't good enough. And I yelled longer and louder. And as that yell came out, I don't remember anything after that other than hearing 2 deep breaths. And I remember going, well, that's not me. That sounds like somebody took 2 deep breaths. Well, maybe I should. And I took 2 deep breaths and I opened my eyes. And Marcus and Cynthia and Doc were all like on the bed with tears in their eyes, looking really concerned. And I'm like, "Hey guys." And they just kind of were, I was like, "You guys all right?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they're looking at me and they're all crying. And I'm like, "What's up?" And I'll get back to what happened. But for the next couple minutes, I just cried. I felt completely, I don't like using this terminology, but this is my construct. I was reborn. I was physically given at that moment a new lease on everything. Because we fasted that morning, I had some fruit. It was the best fruit I've ever had in my life. I just sat there and cried. I was so happy. And after I settled down for like 20 minutes, I just laid there crying, and I felt the best I've ever felt in my life. Eventually Marcus is like, hey man, look at your legs. And I'm like, dude, how am I facing this way? He's like, you flipped. I'm like, what? He's like, you flipped. And I looked at Doc and Cynthia. I'm like, and they kind of smiled and shook their head. I'm like, are you kidding me? Apparently, I transcended. Cynthia told me all about this. She's like, when people transcend this body, she's like, you were in a V shape on the bed and your arms and legs were moving in perfect symmetry. I'm like, are you shitting me? I don't think I could do that if I tried, right? She's like, you were on the bed and your arms and legs were moving in perfect symmetry. You transcended. And then you got into the fetal position. You got into a ball and you got really, really red. And you screamed, took it, that was the big one. And then you took a deep breath, you screamed even louder. And then you flipped. You did a forward flip and landed. And then that's when she's like, she came in close to me and she took 2 deep breaths to help me kind of land. And I opened my eyes and everything was, I've never been better in my life. I do not remember anything physically, right? My arms and legs moving or the flip. I remember one of the yells, but not the second one. And it was the best thing that's ever happened in my life.
So basically, you're making this documentary, and once again, you to me are credible. It's not like somebody at Woodstock going, "Hey man,
No.
I just did mushrooms and it was awesome." You're doing this, and we'll get back into the healing part.
Yeah.
You're doing this to save lives.
Correct.
At the end of the day. That's what you made mention, and you and I had discussions. I was chaired the board of the Augusta Warrior Project.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that 22 suicides a day, which for our listeners or viewers, people need to let that stick in their head. And you had made mention that statistic was prior to COVID hitting. And when you look at the mental health issues around COVID, you feel like that would be higher.
Deke,
but
wait.
Focused.
Not only was that before COVID, that was before what? Afghanistan.
Yeah.
That withdrawal from Afghanistan. And this phone literally exploded with guys. Why is my arms and legs missing? Why is my best friend dead? 20 years we were there and we left in the middle of the night and we left Americans behind. I guarantee you, Deke, that 22 a day is completely off because of Afghanistan, man. I know people. I know personally of guys who have killed themselves because they're like, why did I do 3 tours in Afghanistan, lost my best friends, I'm losing a limb, only to leave in disgrace? It's a horror, Deke. It's awful.
Yeah. Well, but the bottom line is, and I think that's so noble of you, and I know you don't want credit or anything, but I mean at all, but that's leadership. I mean, you're going out on a limb to save lives. And, here again, you 5 years ago would have said, you're freaking crazy. I mean, but that's your passion. That's your purpose. And I applaud you for that, man.
I appreciate it, bro. I on the medicine, so they're very good. They do a good brief to get you there because, you should have 5 intentions for the medicine. You don't want to be selfish, right? And 5 questions for the medicine. I had personal questions about some things in my pet, but I asked about my sister. Every question that I had for the medicine was answered, including, I said, God, what does the rest of my life look like? I want to be? How can I be of service? Use me. What would you have me do? And God answered it because this is it. He said, Matthew, you have got to put the ladder down to spread the word about this. And again, you're right, man, because you and I would have thought this psychedelic, some Woodstock freak or something like that. Richard, what is his name? Ehrlichman. Nixon's, was he the chief, whatever he was to Nixon? I don't know if he was the chief of staff, but Ehrlichman, in an interview a year or 2 ago or whenever it was, said, oh yeah, the war on drugs, we completely made it up. He didn't like the African Americans and he hated the anti-war left. So we tarred both of those groups with this, and the nightly news took care of it for us. I mean, a lot of this stuff, the research that was going on in this stuff, maybe all those people were anti-war because they saw what I saw. They saw that we're all interconnected, that they saw humanity. And with, I told my wife when I got back from the medicine the first time, I'm like, I don't need to travel. She's like, what are you talking about? I saw everything. I saw everything in this universe. I saw God took me on a tour and showed me the beauty of this planet and how we're not being such good stewards of it. And again, man, I have to come back to 5 years ago. Me would be looking at me right now like, are you insane? But that's why that's 5 years ago me. That dude is dead and he's gone.
Yeah.
And I am here now to tell you that 3 of my best friends I guarantee you, because I know them, if they had done this medicine, they would be here today. My best friend, Eric Swenson, would be with his 4 daughters. It's an absolute disgrace that we have to send Navy SEALs, fighter pilots, Rangers, Green, whoever it is, to Mexico. We got to go to a foreign country. And a guy like Marcus Luttrell, if he gets up and says, this stuff saved my life, do we call him a liar? Do we not believe him? Do you not believe me? I'm here to tell you, folks, I am living proof of this. And I did the medicine again, a second time, mainly because of this documentary. Recently, almost a month ago to today, I took 4 other former fighter pilots down for this treatment. One of them, Doug DeStasso, Deuce, the guy he was a C-130 pilot, a spy C-130 type of guy. But he was up checking in the back on some stuff, and they jinked, and he bounced off the ceiling. He broke his neck. This guy was the ops group commander. He was on track to be a general. He graduated from the Air Force Academy. They threw him to the curb with a broken neck, a ton of medications, and said, good luck. Drugs, alcohol, near death. The dude, he's like, he completely healed because of this. So if we can, and this is, and you being in the political business, when's the last time you saw people on the left and people on the right actually agree on something? We got, Dan Crenshaw, I saw Governor Perry in November at an event for this. His son's a Navy SEAL, and Governor Perry used my line. He said, 5 years ago, me running for president, there's no way in hell you would have caught me endorsing something like this. Today, I am absolutely on board with therapeutic and assisted therapy of the stuff. We ain't talking about legalizing it for, kids or something like that. This is for veterans. And there's a quote from a Buddhist monk who died recently about veterans are the light at the tip of the candle. If we can lead the way and show folks that we can heal, maybe we can also be that example that we don't need to resort to violence or war or any of this stuff anymore. So maybe veterans can lead the way to this. So I appreciate it, but man, there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity. If I, when Marcus is like, hey, you want to go to Mexico and do this stuff? I'm like, yeah, man, weekend in Mexico sounds fun with Marcus Luttrell. Holy shit. It changed and saved in my life. So I'm here to tell you that, and this isn't for everybody, right? I get it. There's 2 types of healing that I've seen. One is radical healing. This is radical healing. You're dealing with a dude who, fastest I flew in the Hornet was Mach 1.8. I'm a guy who, you're dealing with SEALs and fighter pilots. This radical healing is more for us. But you can find mindfulness. You can heal there are thousands of ways to heal. This is one avenue, right? I'm not in here, pushing drugs or anything like that because they're not drugs. This is plant therapy. This is TOAD. And actually, I came up with an acronym, TOAD, TOAD, transcend, open, accept, divine. That's exactly what my TOAD experience was like. So if we can get veterans like me to heal, Navy SEALs to heal, I think we can maybe serve as a little bit of an example to folks. There was a guy the other day, and I hate talking about money, but I teach people how to trade options. If I can save lives and show people how they can make money, that's a win-win. This analyst estimated that the psychedelic space, assisted therapy space in the United States alone, not Canada, Mexico, India, China, just in the U.S. is a $500 billion space. And he said, this is like the internet in the mid-90s. You can bet against it, but you're going to be wrong. It's coming. So this is coming right now. And I got to be honest with you, man, Big Pharma's a little scared. They'd love nothing more than Marcus Capone to have stayed on his 10 medicines for the rest of his life, for the rest of his short life. He said, Whiz, I'd be dead. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, he'll show you on his phone. Brain scan from the VA, black, dark, gray. Brain scan 3 months after Ibogaine, completely white. The Ibogaine had gone in, man, and repaired synapses. And it's really cool because even doctors and scientists who are in this space, the Johns Hopkins study that came out recently, even scientists go into this little gray area like, man, there's something there that we can't even quantify or qualify. Maybe we're not supposed to, right? So maybe that is the Spirit of God or the Holy Spirit that we're just never going to be able to quantify. I can tell you, Deke, I was there. I've been there. I experienced the love of God, the healing power. And again, the last time I probably talked like that was when I was an altar boy, in those type of terms. I apologize to God for being lost for some of my life, for being a horrible husband, a shitty father, and all of that was forgiven. It was really interesting to me. I read a book now called A Course in Miracles, and it talked about forgiveness. And this really made me feel good because it said forgiveness doesn't exist in heaven because there's no need for it.
There's no need.
God does not make imperfect things. You are made perfect. I recognize that everybody has a soul. Everybody has a soul. It's just buried under all of this stuff. And what this type of healing does is allow you to destroy that ego and get a glimpse, even if it's for a shining second, of who you truly are to your core. And that can sustain you I guarantee you, Deke, this will sustain me for the rest of my life. And I own a couple of my own fighter jets down here in Fort Lauderdale that I take flying. And this might creep you out to hear a pilot say it. I don't want you to be creeped out, but I have no fear of death. Not that I'm going to go stand on the ledge of a thing or I'm going to, fly under a bridge, meaning that I know exactly what's going to happen to me when I die. The absolute peace that I have is allowing me to live my life with a smile on my face and help as many people as I can. Unless all of that was a lie. And there's a great book, it's probably over on my bookshelf, about this, where it's like, so there's only two scenarios. One is our body's an absolute liar. For some reason, our bodies evolved to lie to us, right? Or this is in fact the truth. So you have to decide, right? And this guy had a great argument that he mapped out how the whole body could lie and how in other instances in thinking and stuff like this and physiologically, the body doesn't lie. But he's like, so the doubters of this, you either believe that your body it's the biggest ruse of our life, right? When you die, you're going to see this light and, that's a lie. Your body has to lie to you. Your body wouldn't care at that point. So I forget the name of the book, but it's an interesting thing because either I'm lying to you that none of this stuff happened or it did. And it made me a better husband, human, father, trader. Not that I care about money, but everything in my life, man, I haven't drank. I mean, I wasn't a drinker, but I was a drinker. It's in our ethos in the military. Let's have a bunch of drinks and make up stories and talk about the old days. There's an ethos of drinking in the military. I was a drinker. The Ibogaine destroyed it. Hell, I was a coffee addict, man. For 6 to 7 months, I didn't even have any caffeine. Now I have a little cup of coffee every once in a while. So the Ibogaine will go in there and clean out everything that needs cleaning. If you Google Ibogaine and you do research on it, it was initially used for heroin addicts. There's a great movie called Dosed, Dosed on, I think, Netflix, where they take a woman who's just horrific. Ibogaine treatment, never touch the stuff again. And again, that's going to creep Big Pharma out because now you don't need methadone for the rest of your life. There goes their income stream. So, man, I'm here to tell you I am a lean, mean fighting machine. I'm a man of God, and I never thought I would be. But this is my mission, and I'm gonna spread this word as much as I can. And I think this No Fallen Heroes documentary, filming the five guys, the five of us that went and did the medicine, and then following our integration, And then we're also going to try and start shooting a TV series called No Fallen Heroes Extraction. I'm sure you and the listeners have seen the Intervention TV series, right? It's been on for, I think, like 11 seasons, like 333 episodes. And they have a 75% success rate with people that have been on that show. So we're going to do No Fallen Heroes Extraction, where we go in and we help veterans. We're going to help spouses. We're going to help dependents, and we're going to help first responders. I had a buddy, 20-year Marine. After he retired, he went down and he's in Miami-Dade fire rescue. He's like, Whiz, what I saw in the Marine Corps pales in comparison to the horror I saw as a Miami-Dade fire rescue guy. So we're going to, that TV show Extraction, we're going to focus on trying to heal and put the ladder down to even more folks. So I could not be more excited and fired up with where I am.
Well, man, and this has been a completely fascinating conversation. And the question I usually ask my guests at the end is, I'm like, okay, what puts joy in your heart and puts a smile on your face on any given day? But I think you just gave me exactly.
God, man. Yeah, I mean, Deke, at the end of the day, waking up, old me waking up, I used to be miserable waking up in the morning. Like, oh man, another day. Or it's just, man, I wake up, I meditate now. There is no higher calling than saving lives. There is no higher calling than trying to help your fellow woman, help your fellow man. It's just, find your bliss, right? You find the thing that just brings you the most joy and happiness. And this is it for me now. I mean, I used to think trading was fun, and helping people learn how to trade the markets gave me a sense of satisfaction. Somebody, hey, Whiz, you helped me make some money. That used to put a smile on my face. But now I recognize how shallow that is, man. A wise man once said, it'll be easier for a camel to pass through an eye of the needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And my dad always used to tell me, hey, son, you can't take it with you. They ain't putting that money in your casket. So Deke, now I wake up in the morning and I am motivated to try and just save a life. We sent other folks to treatment. You wouldn't believe the emails, the texts, the phone calls I get, especially from the wives or the husbands. I got my husband back. I got my wife back. I got my life back. Man, the way that makes me feel, it's a little selfish. It makes me feel fucking fantastic. And it puts a smile on my face. So if this is work, sign me up to do this the rest of my life, my brother. I'll do this 24/7.
Well, man, thank you so much for being an awesome guest, and just fist bump to you, brother.
You got it. Fight's on. Let's try and save veterans' lives, man. I'm here if you know anybody who could use treatment, or if you even have any questions, man. I got, kind of like you, Deke is the mayor. I got an open door. How about that? You reach out to me, shoot me an email, Whiz at WHIZ at nofallenheroes.com, man. If you got any questions about this, or you think I'm nuts.
All right, man. Well, good to be with you. Appreciate
it. You got it,
it.
Deke. Fight's on. Have a good day.
Fight's on. Dropping the mic, and we are out.